Farooq. Jazakallah khair for being here.
Jazakallah khair to you for having this.
I think you know where NCCM, where it is in our ummah here in Canada, what function it serves. I think, alhamdulillah, it's really taken up the right position in the psyche of Muslims, and NCCM has been, I think, where people need it to be. Our people need it to be. Subhanallah. So in our context right now, Muslims in Canada, where should we be organizing from your perspective, at least from the spaces that you occupy and you see? Where should we be organizing our resources and our wealth? That's kind of what I want to do.
Sure. So I think it's an important question. I think it's the question of the hour. I think we've been sort of seeing increasingly we have this multiple moments and shifts of the demographics of our community, of the transitions of our community, of the increasing professionalization of our community, but also in increasing challenges that our community has been seeing socially, religiously, spiritually, economically. And I think what we need to be thinking about is a strategic way of thinking about how we bring our money together. And I think that operates on multiple levels. On one level, there's a way in which we need to make sure that we're engaging with our young people, because obviously the well-known hadith ma naqasa malun min sadaqah, that money, wealth does not decrease by charity. We've been seeing, including in the Muslim community, declining levels of charitable contribution amongst younger people. And so thinking about, okay, we know that this is a thing that's coming, where less and less people who are younger are choosing to contribute in the same kinds of amounts and proportionally to their elder generation. And simultaneously, the level of complexity of the problems that our communities are dealing with as more mature communities in Canada continue to arise. So it's not just that we're dealing with masajid, charitable, like trying to give food and water to people. We're rising above that in terms of the needs of our community. So how do we think about creating endowments that are self-sustaining, that are investing, that are creating more funding, long-term sustainability? How are we thinking about doing that? To me, that's the number one question for our community to be asking.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on some of the answers to that? Like, as in, what kind of endowments? Like, when you think of an endowment, a waqf, usually there's some kind of context to it. Like, a lot of people have these trust funds or these waqfs or these endowments. They support education. They support X, Y, Z, right? Where should that be? Where should that needle be for us in this moment? Well, you could say it could be on multiple things, right? But I think you see the world from a certain perspective, in a certain vantage point, because you're in a certain space and you're dealing with something on this particular front. The front that NCCM sort of traditionally what you'd expect it to be. What does that seem to you? What's really needed in that space?
So look, I'll be honest. I think the community massively has under-indexed on the importance of advocacy and the importance of funding advocacy, and I think we've seen that, continue to pop up, and it's popped up even more clearly in the last few months when we've seen the greatest increase of Islamophobia since September the 11th. Our community is dramatically under-indexed on that, and until we fix that problem, you're going to continue to have more long-term issues that no amount of strategy is going to get you through. No strategy can defeat gas in the tank. And unless you have the gas in the tank to get the car to where it needs to go, you ain't going to get there. And so, of course, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow the truth to shine through, but we need to be there as well to index appropriately. So I think that's one area in which we need to be thinking strategically. But I also think that there's innovative things that are coming forward in our community that also don't necessarily get the support that they need. So, for example, one of the things I hear a lot of are from seniors who are at home and who are isolated. Or before Nisa Homes was there, because NZF created it, there wasn't necessarily a space for folks who are suffering from domestic violence. And so creating a waqf that allows to service things that are of emergent need in our community that nobody else is servicing, as well as serving as an innovation hub where we're giving that startup capital to your domestic violence shelter, to a place where seniors can connect, to a place where you're making sure that the next Islamic financial institution that's really investing in allowing for Muslims to get home ownership, to decreasing the cycles of poverty. Those are the things I think we need to really be thinking about investing in critically.
And that gives me a question on two things that you mentioned. one, maybe you can provide an anecdote about when you need gas in the tank to get to where we need to go, you know, in order to, support advocacy like we need to. Give me an example, like something that kind of drives that home.
Yeah, so really simply, in the last year, I literally saw staff at NCCM work themselves into the hospital
Allah.
because they were fighting so hard and they just kept going and kept going and kept going. But it's like 2 lawyers taking on, hundreds of calls over a week about Islamophobia. And like, these are not issues you can, like, calls you can turn down. These people are like, I got knifed in a subway
Allah
and I need someone to
Akbar.
help me, like, figure out what to do next. These aren't things you can just kind of like, we could try to refer them out to a pro bono. Like, no, they actually need help right away. And that's the kind of thing that I think our community is under-indexed on. And I don't think it's because our community doesn't care. They care so much. They believe in it. They stand for it. But I just think that sometimes we're just not always being the most strategic in terms of thinking about, okay, how do I make sure that I have a balanced approach to distributing? And of course, ma naqsu min sadaqah. The more we donate to every kind of cause, to masajid, to charities that are providing, more of the emergent, like, essential necessities of life, orgs that are doing advocacy, orgs that are trying to help, make sure that our earth is, taken care of from an environmental perspective. All of those things, I think, add into the complexity and the beauty that we're always supposed to be working towards as a community.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, and the second thing I wanted to, an example or how does that second part manifest? Well, you have an innovation hub. Have you kind of dreamt of what this would look like?
So I think like lots of folks have dreamt of what it's looked like, but I think what a lot of folks haven't done is done the research for how other organizations have done it. So if we can look at multiple sectors in multiple other faith communities here in Canada and also in the States that have started by managing multi-million-dollar endowments, which is very easy for the Muslim community to raise. We raise millions of dollars for masajid all the time, but have, through a careful investment strategy, grown those to be billion-dollar funds. And it takes time, it takes energy, but over decades, it's actually quite manageable to do. And that way it becomes self-sustaining. So you kind of get away from the constant need to constantly be fundraising, and you actually allow a wealth fund to continue to grow itself while supporting important initiatives that may otherwise not get the fundraising. Because the distance between the need and what is required to fund that need should not be an effective marketing campaign. Because then what we're actually doing in the Muslim community is we're creating marketing agencies.
We are.
Rather than charities.
We are, yeah.
And that's just ridiculous, right? Are we indexing towards creating a marketing, beast, or are we indexing towards solving the greatest number of needs for the greatest number of people?
No,
for our community?
no, alhamdulillah, because that's what I felt in the past couple of years, that I've just kind of been heads down, is that, man, there are a lot of Muslim marketing companies that are just like, well, I got, I've got 50 influencers, we got this, we got that, and, I do all the analytics, I do all the trending, this is what we can do, this is the number of hits we can get, I was like, there's a lot of marketing going on, is this helping? Is it, because something about, it's really interesting. Someone I know really well. Yeah, he, long time, he started asking this question now for the past quite a little bit. It's like, you know what? Think about this question. What if it was Muslim? I was like, what do you mean? What if the person who designed this table, what if it was Muslim? What about the motor car? What if it was a Muslim? What would that look like? You know what I mean? And that's an interesting question, because
100%.
It seems to suggest that, you know what we think is, what we've taken for granted as a standard model, we've adopted it, hook, line, and sinker. It's like, this is the best way to do things. You go to the MBA, this is marketing 101, this is what we do, blah, 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 this is the best practice, blah, blah, blah. Well, that question seems to suggest that maybe if it was Muslims who developed XYZ, this asset that we're so used to using, like the cell phone. If it was a Muslim, we say that, we mean something special, not just like it happens to be someone who's Muslim, like working as an engineer. But what if it was Muslim? What would that look like? So I think when you think about marketing, outreach, marketing agencies, it can't just be Muslims doing marketing, but how do we reimagine that space?
Well, I mean, I think one of the incredible things is that, like, we actually have this beautiful tradition of awqaf. in our tradition.
Yes, we do.
And the fact that we can't think of one like major waqf in Canada is kind of ridiculous. When this is our tradition of charity is grounded on sustainable charity that continues to create, so that you don't have to constantly be going and doing the normal marketing that you have to do to raise more money and get more need. Like, we actually have this beautiful tradition that is encouraging of people, like when they're passing away, that they dispose of their wealth in such a way that creates more sustainable wealth for the greatest number of people. We just need to go back to our own heritage, to the concept of how does a Muslim do charity?
Somebody was telling me that's actually a Muslim concept.
100%.
Like the whole trust fund idea, it's a Muslim thing.
It's a Muslim thing.
That is one of the answers to the question. What if it's Muslim? Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was Muslim.
Yeah, it's like, folks, alhamdulillah, we kind of figured this one out.
Yeah.
We just need to go back to it, because it's very easy, like in the midst of a capitalist sort of system where everyone can sort of think, okay, I'm going to throw $100 behind a Facebook ad campaign. No, I'm going to throw $200 behind it. And suddenly you have these Muslim charities that, and it's not just Muslim charities, but folks across the board are suddenly over-indexing on the marketing campaign and a race to the bottom. That's really making the social media companies a ton of money.
Shallower, and shallower.
It becomes shallower and shallower.
Clickbaitier.
Clickbaitier, right? And I think that makes it more difficult for some of the most important needs of our community to actually get met, right? Like, look at, I'll take an example, like Yaqeen Canada, right? Incredibly important work to make sure that the theological needs of our children are being met. When you have to waste the time of luminaries like Sheikh Omar to go out and fundraise, we are dramatically wasting people's time. That's just not something they should have to be doing. We need to think about, okay, how are we creating systems so that our greatest luminaries aren't wasting their time by going out and doing something that they shouldn't have to be doing, and we should already have vehicles for. And guess what? We've had this vehicle for 1,000 years. Maybe we should dust that one off, kind of shrug aside the colonial baggage on our shoulders that requires everything to be a competitive, hellscape, and move forward.
Allahu Akbar. When I was in Turkey, I remember we were driving around. We rented cars. We were driving around between cities and stuff like that. And someone pointed out, like, oh, you see these buildings these really old buildings every now and then. They're like, yeah, because out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, oh, these were all like traveler hubs, and they're all built by waqfs.
Yeah.
Like every single one of them, there's a waqf that just runs this whole thing, and it's a commercial establishment, there, but it facilitated all the trade. It made sure trade moved, and it was just like an endowment.
And by the way, in the Muslim community, we already have the people who have the expertise to run these things. Our Muslims run the trust funds and the investments for basically every major corporation on Bay Street. Right? Yeah. They manage billion-dollar funds. It's not like we have an expertise problem. We don't have an expertise problem.
Mindset problem.
We have a mindset problem where we, instead of wanting to invest in the future, we keep thinking about, let's recreate something that works for not thing that was really designed by Muslims as a modality for approaching things.
Yeah, and this is one of the motivations for even doing this. For example, for us to sit here and have this conversation on something that seems kind of dry, socioeconomics from a Deen perspective. It's like, well, that's an interesting conversation. Like, yeah, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had because we've had a political discussion, we have philosophical discussions, and I think we've had our internal wealth growth discussions. I think we're all pretty good at that. Islamic financing, stuff like that. I think we need to talk about like how wealth operates for ourselves, like as a community, and we've got models for that. Our legacy is one of great success in this space.
Totally.
Like we need to have this conversation. And so the question, that comes to my mind, and that's the motivation for starting this, was maybe this was a bit of an answer to that. But I was like, how do we get, the general public? Because this has to occupy a space in someone's mind. Just like NCCM, Zakat occupies a space, etc. The concept of waqf has to occupy a space, because when you go to some other places, people are like, oh yeah, this well is from this waqf. It's like, these services, they're from a waqf. I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. It definitely is like a geographic, cultural kind of thing, where in North America, at least, I don't think we've put that in a particular space. in our psyche, in our understanding.
And I think that is like, I think the moment is now for the Muslim community to say, if I want to win politically, if I want to win philosophically, if I want to invest socially, I have to invest in those things. And I can't invest in those things by a strategy that doesn't allow for maximum return, right? We wouldn't leave all our money in a checking account.
Mm-hmm.
That is essentially how the modern charitable status, the modern charitable method typically works in North America.
Donate $20, move $20 from here to there.
Exactly.
And then I'm going to use those $20.
And then I'm going to use those $20, and then
now I'm
do
going
it
to
again.
another $20.
Exactly. Right. We wouldn't do that. Like, we wouldn't put all of our money in a checking account. We would invest it. We would diversify it. Why wouldn't we do that with millions and millions of dollars that the Muslim community is donating in every single community in North America? It's just very simple. That if we did that, we could like 10x the amount of return that we're getting, if not more than that.
No, absolutely.
That's my true belief.
If I think of just one of our major charities, right? I mean, they're somewhere around, like, you know, they could be doing, the numbers are coming close to like 100 million in that range, in that order of magnitude of just single tap giving.
Yeah.
I mean, if that was like 100 million, well, let's take 10% of that.
Yeah.
$10 million investment fund.
Yeah. And this isn't about and
where could that go?
Yeah, and I think it's just like, I think for communities, it's not like you need to create one centralized block, because then people then it's a control issue. If you're a charity, think about creating a hived portion where you're saying, okay, a percentage of what I'm raising is going to go into a place where I'm going to make that into a sustainable fund, and call it your waqf. So it's not become there's one organization now is like
highly federated.
Yeah, you don't need to be highly federated. You know, you can make it so that every organization is thinking about, how am I going to do a sustainable long-term model so that it's not $20 in, $20 out. How do I think about turning those $20 that came in into $40? And how do I think about making sure that goes to the greatest number of folks? And how am I being intentional? That's all.
I think there'd probably still be a place for I
still think
centralized. Yeah.
Especially at the beginning, it would be good to have one.
Yeah.
But I think in the long term, you could have multiple organizations develop out multiple awqaf. But certainly to set best practices, it might be good to start out with one.
Yeah. Just to show hey, you know what? Hey,
here's
we can
how
do
it
this.
Works. Yeah. Here's how it works.
Give me a model that I can dream around. You know, and to start imagining. Say, hey, you proved it.
Yeah.
You went across the ocean and you came back. Yeah, I guess it works.
100%.
Let's do this.
100%.
Allahu Akbar. All right. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feek. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man. This was great.
No, inshallah.
So.